For this next video, it's really long, so there's no particular subject it goes over, and also I couldn't find a screenshot, so I'm just going to represent it with a creepy priest.
Offend people and scare them away from the school.
What would that look like? Let's record it right now. We'll send it to Julie Wilborn. We'll make this a clip. Go.
No, every single interview, when I sit down with parents, right, I say, we're going to tell your child birth control is mortally sinful. We're going to tell your child that dudes can't marry each other. We're going to tell your child that masturbation and pornography, and we're not going to do this when they're 7, right?
Yeah.
But by the time they're in high school, we're having those conversations because we're serious, right? It's capital T truth. It's orthodox, legit.
And have you ever
Catholic.
had parents be offended by you saying?
I had one walkout.
What happened? Tell me about that.
She just stood up and said, "Thank you so much. I don't think we need to continue." And I said, "Great.
Bye."
Yeah, perfect.
I love how he says this is the truth, and he doesn't say why it's true. This is what my interpretation of the Bible is, therefore, of course it's true. 90% of the arguments conservative Christians make in regards to why homosexuality is bad is, well, that's what the Bible says. Bible says a lot of things. Finally, when they get into the interpretation, I do give credit to one ballsy priest who actually tried to get into the interpretation of it to say why he thought it was wrong versus other things the Bible says that he doesn't take literally, like murdering babies. He basically says that homosexuality applies to all people. ... Okay, and what about the other things, like murdering babies? Does that not apply to all people? Does that not apply to the Jews? What? Like, are we just going to circumvent this? You'll notice the story he had was of a woman getting angry, getting up and leaving. And that's always the thing. They're still in this 2016 mindset where if we offend you, we win. That means we're right if we offend you. 9/11 was great. Yay! I offended people. Now that means I'm smart.
But that's the way I always think of that. And that's what we're fighting against.
Yeah.
I'm not worried any of our kids, any Catholic kids who are solid in their faith right now, I'm not worried that any of them are going to go off and be converted by like Joey the Presbyterian, who's like, "Hey, buddy, will you mind?" Right? That's never going to happen. Yeah. I'm worried they're going to fall into this agnostic, atheistic nothingness. I said, and I got an email about this, I would rather my son grow up and join the Taliban or ISIS or any objectively evil organization than have him grow up and just be, a dad who really likes football. And
you're going to have to explain this because I like where you're going.
No, let me continue. I'm not done with my dad.
We've done Osama bin Laden and now it's the Taliban, and that's fine, yeah. It's like within 5 minutes.
No, but I think most people in our culture, right, that's what masculinity is, right? I watch football. I really like my lawn.
Yeah.
And my wife probably doesn't respect me, and my kids grow up and they don't really return my calls, and I don't really stand for anything. I don't have any fire burning in me. I just sort of exist, and the end all be all of my existence is just be nice. Just don't hurt people's feelings. I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
No, that's awful. And the reason I'm saying I would rather my kid join some horrible organization as opposed to that, because then at least he's burning for. I can work with a fire.
Yeah.
Right? He's burning for something. He's got something in there, and that's what so many of our kids don't have.
Yeah.
It's pathetic. It's so sad.
I see that when I.
What the fuck? Yes, having a simple Epicurean lifestyle where you just relax and try to be nice to other people. That's so terrible. What the fuck are you doing? Go join the Taliban. Blow up children. What the fuck? Who in their right mind would think that just taking it easy and having a Big Lebowski chill lifestyle is worse than joining the fucking Taliban?
Culture. My parents, who I love to death, right? My father was the best man at my wedding, right? A lot of the focus was just be nice, like help people when they need to be helped, and whatever, and don't disrespect other people's views. But it wasn't like here. But here's what we believe. It ought to be. This is what we stand for. Unapologetically, totally, we're not pulling punches. And then there's all the other stuff, and you should still be nice, sure. But if the end all be all of like what you're trying to raise your kid to be is a nice guy, it's gross. Who cares?
Yeah.
What the fuck? Niceness is gross.
I heard on Pints with Aquinas.
The number of atheists that we have in the world is decreasing, while the number of agnostics is exploding. Once again, I'll take a militant atheist over to stand for something. And we all want that, and we have to have that almost like worked out of us by a culture that doesn't care. It's relativism, right? It's modernist nothingness.
It's like
There's nothing wrong with having confidence and taking a stand on occasion. Why do you think so many people today are into activism? That hasn't declined. Black Lives Matter is still huge. People are still protesting the treatment of trans people at the hands of super religious, dogmatic people like yourself. It's just that some folks are okay with saying, I don't know, occasionally on certain issues. Because it's better to say, I don't know, than give a lot of ignorant takes. It's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. Because when you speak on issues without a thorough knowledge, you're just spreading more misinformation. And getting super dogmatic about something is how you lead to the Taliban, which apparently they're very fine with, according to this conversation.
It's like an undue epistemological modesty, or an inordinate epistemological modesty, where someone just stands back and refuses to make a choice because maybe they've been told that everything's true, or you only have your truth, and so it doesn't really matter. And so we just sort of stand back. You don't want to offend anybody. And if I take any kind of position, although I say that, but I mean, look at the militant left in this country today. What are they standing for?
No. That's what they're doing, though. They're filling that gap with anything, literally anything. It can be, I should cut off my penis and become a woman.
Yeah.
Right? I have to have something that's me, that makes me special. And I can...
What the fuck? Yes, I'm going to go through a life-altering surgery just so I can feel special. Why don't you just, I don't know, join the National Guard or become a firefighter or something if you want to be special or stand out from the crowd? I mean, that wouldn't be any harder than going through the things normally trans people have to go through, being stared at constantly and insulted and pushed to the fringes of society, being assaulted and murdered. I think it speaks to his own psychology and why he is what he is. I think maybe he insults trans people for attention, because you get attention when you say something really shocking and insulting. Like a shock jock. That's what they are, basically, I think. Shock jocks. They enjoy the attention they get from saying really insulting things. And I think that speaks more deeply to the lack of meaning and purpose in his own soul. He doesn't have any meaning or purpose. And he's projecting that onto people whose psychology he can't read. He's not a therapist and he's not a mind reader. But I do think anybody who does or engages in psychoanalysis, it does tend to say something about themselves. Isn't that why we always make the joke, a cigar is just a cigar, in regards to Freud?
I said I'm not knocking tattoos in general, but you see this all the time. Let me cover myself with tattoos and whatever and carry around the big rainbow banner because I just desperately need something to stand for, please.
Yeah.
Please, I'm here. I want to be noticed. I want to be seen. I want to be a part of something. And I don't have that. I'm out on this plank from the time that I was a little baby, just told to be nice. And
oh yeah, tattoos. That's the equivalent of trying to stand up for human rights. I'm pretty sure the reason gay people do parades is because for 1,000 years, people like those in the Catholic Church used to burn gay people, like they did with Jews and women they thought were witches and other marginalized groups. And they want to normalize their existence so that they're not stripped of basic human rights, like being able to see their lover when they're in the hospital. But I also want to touch on something here he said. It does give us meaning to stand up for our fellow human beings. Anybody who's seen Schindler's List should know that when you see people suffering and you help them out of that situation, it does give you meaning and purpose. It does give you an objective. It does give you happiness, which you don't need to be religious to feel. You just need empathy. You just need the ability to put yourself in another person's shoes and to imagine what it's like to be them. You can be a Christian and not have this. You can be an atheist and have this. So I jumped ahead. Here he's going to talk about the Civil War. Dear God, let's see what he says.
For many reasons, but you had a civil war, and so there was this real divide. I love that you're very passionate about this. Educate me about America.
Some controversy. All right, cool, sure. So I'll I'll throw it out there. I'll throw out a couple of things first, just to make sure that I check my politically correct
that's right.
boxes.
Say what you don't mean before you say what you do mean. Do you have those matches? Who's got the matches?
Right here. Slavery is bad. I know. That's controversial. That's a clip right there. Matt Fred.
That can be a short, Neil. That can be one of the shorts. Slavery is bad.
Slavery is bad. You shouldn't own other human beings. Right. That being said, no. Just that is sort of the background information.
Okay.
A lot of times when we talk about the Civil War, right, we say the Civil War was fought to preserve slavery. And I want to make a real quick distinction. I'm not some guy who's just going to say, no, it's all states' rights. It was states' rights. States' rights to do what? Own slaves. Right? I agree with that. I totally agree with that.
You don't agree with owning slaves. You agree with that's what it's about.
I agree that the Civil War was a war fought over states' rights. The states' right to do what? Own slaves, right? Which is bad. So all that being said, I don't consider myself a neo-Confederate or anything like that. But I think there's a very real argument to be made for the Civil War. The Confederate cause in the Civil War was a justified thing. And
oh, you noble soul! Slavery is bad. What a brave take! Congratulations for giving us this earthly wisdom. I love how he says he's not a neo-Nazi or neo-Confederate, as if Nazis would have a problem with slavery. Oh my God, whenever he says next has got to be really good.
Our country being fractured might not have been a bad thing. I don't want that to happen now. I'm not saying, but I am saying that that I think it's a lot less black and white than we realize. And I don't like Abraham Lincoln. I think he was probably our worst president.
Why?
He was a war criminal, mostly, right? Things like Indian habeas corpus and.
I mean, criticizing Lincoln is one thing for suspending habeas corpus, although now I haven't really read much about this guy who's criticizing Lincoln. Something tells me he really doesn't talk about, like, the suspension of habeas corpus under the Taliban. I'm guessing he's probably pretty okay with that, but maybe I'm wrong on that. The bigger issue, of course, is he thinks that slaves... He already admitted, I don't know if I played this clip or I skipped ahead a bit, he already admitted he agrees the Civil War was over slavery. So then, and now he's saying that he agrees with the Civil War happening, and he thought that us splitting into two was justified so that the South could continue to enslave people. Now, I'm not a big fan of Lincoln either, but I do think he was one of our best presidents. I mean, where's his competition? You have to compare a man to his predecessors. Otherwise, the man of their time argument, which I'm almost certain these two gentlemen apply to the Founding Fathers, wouldn't work. And when you do so, it kind of takes the sting out of habeas corpus because, I mean, it's a good rule, but if it's only limited in its application, like to rich white people, then it's not that great of a rule. Like, so you could criticize Lincoln for saying he was an abuser of human rights by suspending habeas corpus. What was the status of human rights when America was practicing slavery prior to him? What was the value of human life in America when Lincoln was president? I think if we can concur that the value of human life wasn't very high, then I think we can confirm or conclude that Lincoln was a man of his time.
The state legislature in prison at Fort McHenry because they were going to vote to secede from the Union. Now, once again, slavery is bad. However, I don't like living in a world where when a sizable piece of the country says we don't want to be a part of this anymore, the federal government can say, oh, but you have to be, and we're going to kill you. We're going to send hundreds of thousands of people to die to force you to be a part of something that you are not open to being a part of. And logically, I understand how there's some flaws with that, right? Because eventually, what does that mean? We're all broken up like a Holy Roman Empire kind of thing with dozens and dozens and dozens of these little fiefdoms within some, right? But I still stand by it. I still feel very weird saying, no, if a part of your country wants to break away, you should force them at gunpoint to stay.
So I love how he recognizes that the point he's making is stupid, but he stands by it. Like, yes, I recognize that what I'm saying is utterly batshit crazy, but I'm going to stand by it. And you can't divorce why somebody's separating. Like, yeah, okay, separating in a vacuum, fine. But why were they separating? You could alienate this even further. Are all wars bad? No. So therefore, the war that Hitler conducted was right. What? So no, not all wars of separation are bad, but this one was.
The Confederacy, right? They say, we want to leave, right? And they did want to leave because they hated Abraham Lincoln. They were worried he was going to take away the rights to own slaves. Slavery was the catalyst. I want to double down, triple down, quadruple down on that, right? Abraham Lincoln says, you cannot leave. And if you try to leave, we're going to force you to stay, right? So it starts at Fort Sumter when the Confederates fire on a Union stronghold on an island, right, off the coast of South Carolina. And then that's when the first actual violence takes place. Nobody actually died except for, I think, a mule. I'm serious. There might have been one guy who died when a cannon blew up on him. I'm not a historian. I don't claim to be, right? But then we see an incredibly bloody 4 years of hundreds of thousands of crimes against humanity being carried out on the people of the South because Abraham Lincoln and the federal government says, no, you cannot walk away. You're stuck. And you even look like at the language shift. Before the Civil War, it was the United States are, right? The United States are going to war with Mexico. After it becomes the United States is. And we see the Civil War sort of being this hinge point of concreting together, right, sort of federal power at the expense of the states and the states' rights. We didn't have an income tax before the Civil War, so that's fun. And here's my biggest complaint with Abraham Lincoln, if I can just go off on this for a minute.
As long as you want.
The Emancipation Proclamation, right? What is the Emancipation Proclamation?
I don't know.
Do you know?
No.
So
the idea of freeing slaves? Is that right?
So typically when you say, what is the Emancipation Proclamation? If you ask a high school kid that, they say, well, that's when Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves.
Right.
But it's not, right? It's when Abraham Lincoln said, slaves in the Confederacy, right, that country that is broken away from the United States is not a part of us anymore, they are now free. So it'd be like me saying, or Joe Biden saying, Russia is no longer allowed to take this part of the Ukraine, right? And they're saying, like, who are you? Who cares? Well, you don't get to make rules over here. Meanwhile, Maryland and Kentucky and even the Confederate territory held by Union troops that still had slaves were exempt from the Emancipation Proclamation, which means Abraham Lincoln does not free slaves. He could actually free and instead free slaves in this country that is not a part of the United States. And from that point on, right, you see a shift in
That's
everything.
really interesting. I like that. Yeah.
Nothing he's saying here is original. Frederick Douglass called Lincoln a white man's president. White saviorism has been complained about constantly. Why do you think people want black history? Because they don't want to be made side characters in their own history. And how much you want to bet this asshole, this hypocritical asshole that's saying this right now, probably doesn't care about black history, probably calls it political correctness and opposes greater diversity in the media. The only time you'll ever see a conservative complain about Lincoln not being the great emancipator is in comparison to even more racist white people like the Confederates. These are the same people who, if they weren't outright racist and bigots supporting slavery, would say that the North and the South fighting, it's a wash. That is kind of what he's saying, because the North was hypocritical. And it was. But they were also fighting a war. And we, in our pragmatism, do things that we ordinarily wouldn't. We would all love to be idealistic. Why go to war at all over slavery, supposing he had done so from the very beginning? Why not just convince the South that slavery was wrong? Well, people tried that and it didn't work. Now, I'm not sure Lincoln trying to appease certain slave owners so he could win the war was the best strategic plan he could muster, but I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. And he did change his mind, and I highly doubt this guy's going to mention that. What's important to recognize here is that this guy's goal is not to dishonor the memory of Lincoln because Lincoln wasn't as great as we thought he was, but rather to make slave owners look less terrible.
Now it's a war to free slaves, which it was not before. It was a war to hold the country together.
So what's your opinion on the Confederate flag then? Because I think there are some symbols that become so bogged down that there's no use in revivifying them.
I hear that.
think the word gay is like that. Like a word is a symbol. You know,
Right.
the word gay has come to mean something. And as much as I might try to reclaim that word, maybe it's better just to find another word. And I sometimes wonder if that's true about the Confederate flag, whether it's true or not. In the minds of many people, it comes to mean something synonymous with racism, which is ugly and evil. And therefore, let's just find another symbol. But
And you're saying it sort of as a, like when you'll say people are trying to reclaim the swastika or something like that. As, it's a sign of peace and whatever. It's like, yeah, but that's not what I see.
I don't know what people say about the swastika, but sure. Like something that's
I
come
think
to
when we
mean in
say-
the minds of many something that it didn't originally. Maybe it's best just to get rid of it. But what do
Well,
you
when
think?
you say Confederate flag, right, you're probably talking about the St. Andrew's cross, right?
Yeah.
Red,
which is,
red
I have to say,
background. It's
probably
beautiful.
the
It
most
is
beautiful
gorgeous.
flag I've ever seen.
I can hear an argument for that, right? When I think Confederate flag, though, I think of the stars and bars, which look, by the way, exactly like the flag of the state of Georgia right now. Exactly like it.
Interesting,
That was
yeah.
the first national flag of the Confederacy. The difference is that the Georgia seal is no longer, or was not, right, in the circle of stars there. But that's what I think of as a Confederate flag. And I don't know. That's a good question. I'm not sure if I'm willing to say, yeah, we just need to throw this out, because you're right. The Confederate flag has been co-opted in a lot of ways by racists and people who are, Klansmen and stuff like that. People who are saying, hey, remember that time when we could own black people? Like, yeah, that's obviously bad. That's obviously evil.
Yeah.
Right. But I've got a picture of Stonewall Jackson up in my kid's schoolroom. Right. I think there are a lot of stories of bravery and heroism and sort of underdogs standing up for the big guy and protecting
Gotcha.
our people.
Yeah.
Rather than, and so.
I love how he defends the Confederate flag here, because he doesn't say, well, it's about Southern heritage, which I think is a lame and disingenuous argument, but it's way better than what he's saying here. Like, how do you view Southern plantation owners, one of the richest and most powerful group of people in the world, as the underdog? And then he goes on to say, well, we're defending themselves. You already said, and you said doubled down, quadrupled down on it, that the war was about slavery. They were not defending themselves. They were defending slavery. All right, he doesn't really say too much interesting afterwards, so I'm going to end it there today. Like, subscribe, share. Don't be these guys.